I come back. Every year I get newer. I'm the dust on the moon. I'm the trash in the sewer. Let's go. I come back. Every year I get brighter. If you thinking hip hop is alive, hold up your lighter.
Because this is the slide for balance control. Now in iPhase we talk about the neural hierarchy, and of course the neural hierarchy is what? Visual, vestibular, proprioceptive. And it's how your brain weighs information essentially, because we're wired for survival, right? But here's the thing. The neural hierarchy, at least that term, the way we're using it, no one else is using it that way. It's kind of made up. I mean, we're all using it now, so we all know what we're talking about when we say it. But at the time, Google wasn't really helpful. So again, I didn't know what to do at the beginning. I ended up I talked about surfing, and I think I showed 3 or 4 people that I know how to juggle. That's pretty much what I did for my presentation. So, we come to this year. You guys invite me to present, and I say, what do you want me to talk about? And this is what you guys told me. Choose anything you like. And I thought, cool. Then I said, whoa. That's a lot of freedom. Now, freedom's probably a good thing, right? I mean, what's the opposite of freedom? If I was going to ask you some words that were the opposite of freedom, what would you say?
I'd say constriction.
Constriction, okay. What else? What else comes to mind?
Married.
What is it?
Married.
Would you say marriage? Yeah. I'll leave that one off for now. What else comes to mind? Incarceration, confinement, okay. So confinement. Imprisonment or incarceration. Those are probably things, what do you got?
I'd say constraint and restraint.
Constraint and restraint. And restraint against your own will, right? What else? Is there a hand in the back?
No choices.
No choices, okay. So obviously I had a lot of freedom, I had a lot of choices. And that can be scary sometimes. Have a lot of choices and figuring out what you're about to do. Like fix your ear. Excuse me. But these things are probably things that you'd want to avoid if you could, correct? So freedom is probably it's probably something you would hope for. Would you agree? So I thought, I got a lot of freedom. I really don't know what to do. I started thinking back and almost hoping for the time when Google was unhelpful. And then suddenly it hit me, like bang, I had this realization. And it was this. Thanks to everything that I went through in the past, thanks to my coaches, I was prepared to present on anything. I started to figure out what it was. But I knew I was prepared. If you look here, you'll see I might be a little over-prepared. But that's okay. I had all this freedom, and I thought, so what am I going to do? I want to do something substantial. I want to do something all time. And that's what we're going to aim for today. We're going to do something all time. We're going to begin with another story, a story about time, or about history, essentially. Then we're going to learn an assessment. This is Z-Health course, so you always get an assessment, right? Usually you get multiple assessments. That's going to be your biggest takeaway. And if you get nothing else from this class today other than the assessment, the biggest takeaway that I hope you guys walk away with is a new assessment process for yourselves, to begin coaching yourselves all time. we're also going to discuss a couple different levels of interaction or of Z health. So we'll get to that later. But the first thing is the assessment. Now, assessment. Think back to our phase. Remember when it was first introduced, we said assessment is part art and part science, right? And we said art is what? And we take a bunch of things and we put them together into one whole picture. And science is when we take a big whole, we do the opposite. Take a big whole and we chop them apart. And we inspect each individual piece. And we said there are two things that are diametrically opposed, right? Meaning that they lie along the same line. But there are two different natures along the same line. Now here's the part that I think often gets overlooked. Remember the brain? You guys remember the feeding pattern of the brain? What's the feeding pattern of the brain? From bottom to top and back to front, right? And if you remember this part here, this little back bottom part, what's it called? Cerebellum. It's called the cerebellum. And what happens in the cerebellum? Integration, right? So in the cerebellum, what we do is we take a bunch of bits from all different places and we put it together into one picture. So integration happens first. You're an artist first, number one. You get it? So there's art and science, but you got to be an artist first. You got to make a picture so you can look at it later and dissect it and be able to take out the relevant information from it. In fact, the picture making process or the mapping process begins even before this, even lower than the cerebellum. Whenever you have information merging together, there's mapping occurring. So for instance, in the dorsal horn of the spinal cord, where there's a lot of information arriving at once, it's mapped. Right? There's a picture that's made, or a representation that's then sent up or ascends the cord. So everybody wants to be a scientist, and that's awesome, because science is really important. I'm going to tell you why later. But remember this, you're an artist first. When you forget about the artist, that's when we start taking ourselves too seriously. And we're all guilty of that sometimes. I certainly am. So, we start as an artist. What do artists do? One thing artists do is they tell stories. So we're going to talk about history. History is an art. And the story we're going to talk about today, or we're going to begin discussing, is the story of human culture, or the evolution of human culture. Now, if you're following along in your book, what you want to look at is page 16 and 17. This is what I call the real paleo story. Let me know when you're there. You guys ever heard of paleo diet? Everybody in this room's heard of paleo. Paleo is much more than a diet, though. Paleo is the beginning of humanity. It's the beginning of our culture. Paleo has a lot more to do than just, avoiding bread and getting anxious because of a proposed bacon shortage in a few years. So, we're going to talk about the development of culture.
We keep showing you and showing you and showing you this is what it is. We gon' flow with you. You know it's true. Hip hop, this is what it is. We keep showing you and showing you and showing you this is what it is. We gon' flow with you. You know it's true. Hip hop, this is what it is. A man once said that the streets are watching us. If this be the truth, we must keep hip hop in us. They'll never topple us. You done heard the